yesterday I posted some pictures of a final-ish project that I had just completed. So I made those countertops back there. Faux, marbly, quartzy looking countertops I made out of a couple pieces of plywood and some epoxy finish. I had a lot of people ask me how to do it, so I thought I'd post a video today showing you how I accomplished that basic thing on this table down here. Now obviously this is going to be different than doing the full countertop from beginning to end, as I had to make that countertop out of some plywood and cut a hole out for the sink. But the same principle applies in regards to the artistic portion of like putting the epoxy on top. I will let you know that if you guys have a Formica countertop or if you have a granite countertop and you like the layout of it already, you can actually apply this epoxy on top of a countertop that you already have made. So you don't necessarily need to make a new countertop. I had to because I reconfigured and extended the counter by about 4 feet, so I couldn't use what I had previously. So this table has all the supplies I need to do the epoxy resin. I bought the system itself from Ultra Z Epoxy. They have everything that you need online. So I bought a kit. It came with 2 buckets of part A, 1 container of part B. Separately, I had to buy some pigment that goes into the epoxy. So this isn't glittery or anything. It's just a solid pigment that dyes the color of epoxy that you have. You can get black, you can get white, you can get red and green. I mean, you can go crazy with this stuff. I wanted white because I wanted it to look like marble. And then I actually got on Amazon packets of glitter that are specifically for epoxy. And it was significantly cheaper to buy it on Amazon because I could buy these little like 10-gram packages as opposed to the giant container that you would buy on the Epoxy website. This came with a bunch of colors that I'll never use. Like, I'm never gonna use these colors, right? But for me to have the gray, the white, and the black, it was like $8 for all of these, so this was worth it. So I'll be using the glittery ones to make the veins in the countertop. I've got a putty knife, a foam roller, a squeegee. I have a scale. I mean, you can use a measuring cup when you're measuring things out, but I like to use a scale because it's really precise. I've got a heat gun. I've got some alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and a little spray bottle. And then this isn't necessary. You can use a paint stirrer, but I also have this stirrer so that whenever I mix the epoxy, I can ensure that it's mixed really well. All right. First, you have to do surface prep though. So this table that I have that I'm gonna be doing today, it's really dirty. It needs some help, so I'll be back. Okay, so originally I was just going to go directly over the surface of this table, leaving it in its frame. And I was gonna use this metal edge as a boundary so that whenever the epoxy hits the edges, it would have a boundary and it wouldn't like pour over the edge. But I actually decided that I want it to pour over the edge. When you're adding things like veins, you kind of want the epoxy to be able to free flow. If you create a boundary, it's gonna be really hard to move the veins and make it look like it came off the side of the table. Otherwise, it's gonna look a lot chintzier if you have that boundary. It needs to be able to kind of flow over the side. And I'll show you what I mean whenever I'm going. So I have to start by cleaning up the surface of the table. I'm starting with just some Windex. And then after I'm done and I'm finished with messing around with the table and it's all together, I will go over it with some isopropyl alcohol. I want to make sure that any oils that may be on the table, either from touching it or from cleaning it, are completely removed prior to adding any epoxy. The epoxy will not adhere to the areas where there's oil. It will actually like move away from it and you'll have a divot where the table is still visible and the epoxy just doesn't go and flow over that spot if you do not clean it off well enough. So I'm going to make sure that I do that. So then I just put some alcohol on it because anytime like your hand touches it, if you have oily fingers or anything, the epoxy won't adhere to it. Okay. So you'll like have this thick coat of epoxy and then there'll be a fingerprint of like this crater where the epoxy won't, because it like goes against the oil. So I just go over it with alcohol and dries really quickly. And that'll get all the salt dust and stuff off too. So this company's system is a 2-to-1 ratio with their epoxy. A lot of epoxies are a 1-to-1 ratio, but that's why we got 2 buckets of A and 1 bucket of B. They have a template online for how many square feet of countertop you have, the thickness that you're gonna make the epoxy, like how many ounces you need of each to like cover the surface area. And I like using this to weigh it as opposed to a measuring cup, because you really do need to be like pretty precise with your measurements. If you don't have enough B, then it's gonna never set and be hard, it'll be tacky at the end. So you have to make sure that you have enough of that. I'm gonna do 20 ounces here. I'm gonna finish off this bottle. So that's part A. And then you have to mix the color in now. You don't want to like mix the B in and let it start having the chemical reaction, because then it could like mix funny. So you want to make sure that A is totally mixed with the color before you put B in. So I need to add 11. After I added the color, you can see that it added ounces to this. So I need to add 11 to this. So I'm going to 25. 35, because I can't math. So yesterday, another thing that I added that I'm not doing today, actually I might, was some metallic powder. So this stuff. But I have the Ultra Z Epoxy's brand of it, and it was awful. You can see at the end of the countertop, whenever I was pouring the bucket out, like I didn't even pour it all out, but when I was getting towards the bottom of the bucket, that stuff was super chunky. And so there's like chunks in my countertop at the end from the powder being chunky. Like you can see that this powder is like really smooth. It's like super fine. It's dust, yeah.
Flour.
Mm-hmm. So you can add that in, but you just want to make sure that it's like mixed and not chunky, because that's stuff. But it makes it like metallic, and they say it gives it more of a realistic stone look. Whatever. I just like sparkly things.
Yeah.
So for this, because this is the only layer that I'm going to put on here, I just want it to be as thick as possible. So you just kind of, it's called flooding. You just pour it in the center, and you don't roll it. You just kind of push it with the roller towards the edges so that you can get as thick of a coat as possible. It's eventually going to roll off the sides, and that's fine.
How long does that take to cure?
So 72 hours to fully cure. It's pretty solid to the touch after like 16 to 24 hours. It depends on like humidity, temperature, and stuff like that. But it feels really, really tacky up until then. So you don't even want to touch test it, because you will put fingerprints in it like extremely easily. You can touch that countertop now without too many issues. But if you like put your fingernail into it right now, it's still soft enough that it'll leave an indentation. So I want to pull my hair back, because if a strand of hair falls in this, it'll look like blatantly obvious. So I'm putting it thinner towards the edges. When I put the veins and stuff in, I'm going to be pushing stuff out, so it'll get thicker from that. And like just rolling it out and making it kind of wet with the epoxy will allow it to flow better once it does start going over the edges. So if it goes over the edge, it literally doesn't matter, because that's what it's intended to do. And when I did the countertops, like I had to make it go over the edge to ensure that there was a thick enough layer. This one, the edge isn't going to show because it sits inside of that So this bottle just has alcohol, and then those metallics that I showed you, I just put like a small amount in the bottle with this. So with the alcohol, when I spray this on here, the alcohol will evaporate, so all it'll leave is like the glitter or whatever. So this wasn't the veining. So all of like the fine striations and like color variations that aren't these like actual stripes was all from the bottle being sprayed. So I don't know if you can see how like, this isn't solid white right here. I didn't want it to be like white and then stripes of color. I wanted it to be like marble and then veins, right?
Yeah.
So the marble portion came from this. Just kind of like sprayed at random. And I kind of like it when it doesn't mist and it's more like a droplet thing. You can use an actual like sprayer that has like a stream if you want to get like big droplets like that. I just kind of move the bottle around so it happens somewhat naturally. Once I see that I've got all the color that I want, I go back through and I actually roll it. So I'm not necessarily spreading it around this time. I'm gonna roll it. And you wanna go, if you have like a certain pattern that you want, like if you want it to like look like it has a flow in a certain direction, you're gonna wanna make sure that you kind of like roll in that direction. So you have about 45 minutes to work with the product in its entirety before it starts like setting up and you want to leave it alone. So I'm going to take this time now to make a tiny little container of the gray. So 2 ounces of A. I don't know, I kind of feel like, I don't know, I like this. So yesterday I used the gray lunar dust. I thought about going through with some black. I feel like that would be too stark. So I'm just gonna stick with what I know. Do the gray. I'm gonna get the popsicle stick from back here. So it's 2 ounces of A, the dust that's gray, and I need to add 1 ounce of B. Either had too much coffee or not enough coffee because I'm like super shaky today. And so I don't pour the veins on. I more or less like dribbled them on, which is kind of how the company had shown doing it. I mean, some people like to pre-plan where their veins are gonna be. If I just want like one big vein or like a Y-shaped kind of like thing. I kind of want to go with like the direction of some of the detail here. So I'm going to kind of like start go across. Add one more.
I think it's pretty safe to say you're an artist.
Have a few like rocks that add a little bit more texture and detail to the things. So you really don't have to mix that much because I didn't use a ton. And then once that's on, I move it around mainly with the roller, but also with the heat gun. So like I said, the heat gun is going to get rid of any bubbles. Like you can't see them right now, but as this sits, like the surface is going to, like you can see a few bubbles like right now whenever I see it like in direct light. This is going to smooth it out. So I push it around with the heat gun. But then I also kind of smooth it out with the roller. Yesterday I just kind of went over each of the lines. It looks like it mixes it in, but they'll pop back up.
That is incredible how this line has just come together to look like marble.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? And it's not hard, and it doesn't take long at all, and it's so cheap.
It is a pretty massive project though. Like, it takes some space.
Take some people watching your children.
And it takes gumption, like to be able to go with a blank table and pour your paint over it.
I'm happy to paint anything you own. Give me permission.
Joe would probably appreciate me starting to do this on other people's houses instead of our own.
I kind of don't know if I want to do anything else. You could also, if you wanted to add a little bit more flow to it, I could pick up like this side and let it pour, and it would add like a little bit more of like a easy flow look to it. I don't think I want to do that.
Does heat make it set any faster?
No, heat just, I don't know why heat gets the bubbles off. There's probably some scientific reason. It doesn't really set it up any faster. But I can see as I'm doing this, like, it's just popping all over the place.